DJ Scream, heavy in the streets.
We gon' get it, we gon' get it, we gon' get it. We gon' get it, we gon' get it. Get it in blood. Get it in blood. We gon' get it, we gon' get it, we gon' get it. We gon' get it, we gon' get it. Get it in blood. Get it in blood.
Hood rich.
Get it out the mud.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Saints and Appetizers podcast. And this evening we have some appetizers for you. So we're already back here with some appetizers, just a couple days after dropping the Saints topic podcast. So, but now we are on to some appetizers for you, and what we have here is UFC 306. Sean O'Malley, versus Merab Dvalishvili, and this is September 14th, so Saturday coming up, 10 Eastern, 9 Central Time, and this is in the new special venue, the Sphere. That's like somewhere like out in the desert, like Paradise, Nevada, in the United States. So that's a big deal, I guess, just because that's one of the first events, I guess, being held in the Sphere, and I guess this whole event in general is supposed to go like towards Mexican Independence Day. So majority of these fights have a fighter either that is Mexican or from Mexican or just lives in Mexico. I think Diego Lopez, he's actually originally from Brazil and I would think is Brazilian, but he lives in Mexico. But yeah, so that's the card here. It should be interesting. I don't know how them being in the Sphere, for me just watching it off the pay-per-view, I don't know how amazing that'll be to me. I think that's something more for the moment, I guess. The experience for something like that I think you'd only get that from actually being there. But still, that's a cool thing, and the Mexican Independence Day is nice too. You know, you gotta promote different countries and different origins of fighters, and there's some good ones that have come out of there. But the one thing that I'm surprised about is that this is supposed to be like Mexican Independence Day and all that. And I'm surprised surprised Brandon Moreno wasn't on this card. Whether he's fighting for a belt or not, there for a while, especially his like quad trilogy with Figueiredo, Davis and Figueiredo. You would definitely have thought that Brandon Moreno was not only one of the most popular UFC fighters, but probably the most popular UFC fighter in Mexico. And I think he may have been one of the first champions. Mexican champions, and I think Alexa Grasso was the first female women's champion, female champion. But anyways, let's get into this main event card. Some of these fighters towards the bottom of even the pay-per-view card are all fighters that have only to this point in their career have only fought on like UFC fight nights. And I'll admit I'm a little casual to the point where I really only watch prefer to just watch the main card, the pay-per-view on the main card. So I miss out on a lot of the preliminary fights and a lot of the fight nights. I'll tune into the fight nights sometimes if there seems to be a good main event, or even the preliminary cards, prelim cards on some of these UFC, the pay-per-view events. Sometimes there'll be some good fights on the prelim, you know, kind of like the main event for the prelims, but there really isn't much of that besides really the top 3 fights. I would say this card is not that great. I wouldn't say it's like a blockbuster card or anything. I think it hurts it here just with these first 2 fights are just not really very notable fighters. 2 of them don't even have their own Wikipedia page, if that tells you anything about them. But let's get into it regardless of all of that. So can I get a menu And so the first fight we have here is a flyweight bout between Ronald Rodriguez and Odie Osborne. So Ronaldo Lazy Boy Rodriguez is definitely a young and up and coming fighter with a lot of potential. He's only 25 years old, and he is 16-2 in his career in the in the 18 fights that he's had. He's 16-2, and he is 6-0 in his last 6 fights. But uh, Denis Bondar is the first fight that he had in UFC. Was his last fight in February. On February 24th, 2024, he had a fight, UFC Fight Night 237. So that was he doesn't have a lot of experience yet in the UFC, but has a good career. His resume, his fight history and results are pretty good. So I think that's probably why he's made it to the UFC, because in his 16 wins, he has 7 wins by knockout, 5 wins by submission, 3 by decision, and then I guess another. I imagine that's like a doctor stoppage or disqualification or something. And then in the 2 losses, he's only lost going the distance and going decision. So I would say just kind of going off of his record, I would say he's someone that has a good Brazilian jiu-jitsu background, but prefers to strike. And the reason I go off of that, I'm just kind of going off these fight cards here, is I guess that he's had TKO stoppages, and 2 of his last 3 wins by stoppages were by submission. So he's obviously has something in that submission game as well, and that kind of goes directly to my pick in this fight. So in his last fight, it was Denise Bernard. He got the rear naked choke over him in his first fight in the UFC. And so his opponent is Odie Osborne, who I feel is almost like set up as a can or a jag. So Ronaldo Lazy Boy Rodriguez can so he can get possibly an easy win. But three uh, in his last 6 fights, he is 3-3, and in the last 2 fights that he's had, he's lost both of them on fight nights, and lost both of his most recent fights with rear naked chokes. So he's lost both of them with rear naked choke. And Ronaldo Rodriguez's most recent fight win was a win by rear naked choke. But Odie Osborne, he has 20 fights in his career, 12 wins and 7 losses. In the 12 wins, he has 5 wins by knockout, 4 by submission, and 3 by decision. And then in the 7 losses, he has 2 by knockout, 4 by submission. So he's showing it seems as if he can definitely get choked out, and then 1 by decision and 1 no contest. So this is kind of an easy pick for me. These are both what you would say are like true mixed martial artists. You can take that in off of just how they win their fights. They're not all just knockouts. They're not all just submissions. They're not all just going the distance. They can beat you in a very varied amount of ways. But Odie Osborne, it looks like you're going up like the worst matchup for you. So you got a guy coming off of a rear naked submission win, and you've lost your last 2 fights by rear naked choke. So I think in this bout between Ronaldo Rodriguez versus Odie Osborne, I'm going with Ronaldo Rodriguez to get the third in a row submission victory over Odie Osborne. So this will be Odie Osborne's third loss in a row by way of rear naked choke. So that's the first bout we have on the card. So then onto the second fight on the card is a lightweight bout between Daniel Zellerber versus Esteban Vix. So, and this is another one where both of these fighters, I don't think either one of them have had a fight on a pay-per-view card yet. So, uh, so has Daniel Zellerber has had has had 5 previous fights in the UFC, and I think both of these, Esteban Vix, they both have similar records. Both of them uh, have pretty impressive records. Because Esteban Vix, uh, he's 13-1, and then Daniel Zellhuber uh, is 15-1. So that's pretty impressive. But let's see. So Daniel Zellhuber, I would say he's more of a knockout artist, a striker, but also has these are just also has a wrestling style. His style is wrestling, but likes to get knockouts if he can, but has no problem grinding it out either. So in his last 6 fights, he's 5-1, and he's on a 3-fight winning streak where he's got some couple decisions and a submission by Anaconda choke. So there's that wrestling kind of coming into play there. But he's tough. So he's had 16 fights with 15 wins and 1 loss in the 15 wins. Even though he's a wrestler, half of them have come by knockout, three by three by submission, and and 3 by submission and 5 by decision. And then he has just 1 loss by decision, which is very, very similar to Esteban Ribovic, who, let's see here, he has he's only had, so he's had a couple fights in the UFC, about the same amount. So he's had 4 fights in the UFC as well, and he's 4-1. No, he's 5-1 in his last 6 fights, and these are just very, very similar fighters, just in their style and their records, So he has 15 fights or 14 fights with 13 wins, 7 by knockout, 5 by submission, and 1 by decision. And then in the 1 loss, it's just one decision, just like Daniel Zellhuber. So yeah, this is kind of a tough fight to pick. I think I'm just going to go off the guy that's maybe a little well known and has one more fight in the UFC than the other guy. But I don't see that being a very dominant fight, really. I think I just want to go with like the young, up and coming, the guy with all the potential. Even though Esteban, he's only 28 years old himself, but obviously he just hasn't entrenched himself in the UFC good enough to get a Wikipedia page yet. So we're having to go here off of SureDog. But yeah, so in the second fight on the UFC 306, O'Malley versus Dvalishvili, I have, and this is a lightweight bout between Daniel Zellhuber versus Esteban Ribovic. I'm going with Daniel Zellhuber to win this, and I think he's just going to win by decision because it shows just over the history and the records, the resumes of these two fighters. They're both very, like, they're true mixed martial artists. They can knock you out, they can submit you, they can grind you out and go to decision. But recent history shows that neither one of them get stopped or finished, and just the majority of the career they never even lose, really. But one of them has to lose in this fight. Well, technically, I guess one of them doesn't have to lose. They could go to a draw, but I don't see that happening. So I just see Daniel Zellerberg winning that by decision, and it might actually be a better fight than maybe some people anticipate, just from the fact that they're not as well known as some of these fighters I'm about to get into a little bit. But anyways, let's get on to the third fight on the card, the UFC 306 card. So these are a little more notable names, a little more familiar to myself at least. So we have a flyweight bout between Brian Ortega versus Diego Lopez. So just similar to the fighters we just went over, both of these have kind of a entrenched. I guess Brian Ortega. He was born in California and all that, but I think he has Mexican heritage. And then Diego Lopez, I think he was born in Brazil, but he resides and trains in Puebla, Mexico. So I don't know if he's necessarily a Mexican, but obviously he has lot of love to be living there and to be training there. So that's what this card was built up for, I believe. Was definitely to show some love to our Mexican brethren down south. But this should be a really good fight. I don't know. I think Diego Lopez is maybe more on the doorstep of a flyweight championship bout than Brian Ortega is, who's kind of had some losses and has been a little injured here and there over his last couple fights. And he had a flyweight championship bout against Alexander Volkanovski and didn't win, but that was almost 3 years ago. But he's been a little banged up and injured, missed almost 2 years due to the shoulder injury that he had against Yari Rodriguez, but then came back and beat Yari Rodriguez with a submission arm triangle. That was just February 24th, 2024. But let's get in this. But yeah, just going over Brian Ortega's recent record here. He's had some tough losses, some doctor stoppages, injuries, but he's just 3-3 in his last 6 fights, and he's only on like he had the injury and the decision loss to Alexander Volkanovski before he came back. Came back in February and had the rematch against Yari Rodriguez, where he won that at 58 seconds of the third round, and that fight was actually in Mexico City. So it's kind of funny that this fight in the Sphere, it's supposed to be for Mexican Heritage Day and all that, but it's in Nevada. Like I understand they're wanting to do it because they want to do it in the Sphere, but I mean, if it's so about the Mexican Heritage Day, why wouldn't you do it in Mexico? I don't know. All that doesn't really make a ton of sense to me. But Brian Ortega in his 20 fights, he has 16 wins, 3 losses, and then 1 no contest. In the 16 wins, he has 3 wins by knockout, 8 wins by decision. So it shows that Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is his main style, and his ground game is what he's usually wanting to go to. But he can beat you with knockouts, and he can go the distance as well because he's had 5 wins by decision. And then in the 3 losses, he's been knocked out twice, but he's never been submitted. So that shows you how good his Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, his wrestling, and his ground game is. That he submits people, but he can never get submitted. So he has a great ground game with not only offensive ground game but defensive, because he's not ever getting caught in anything. And then he's lost just one by decision. So I mean, an impressive record, and it's hard to pick against Brian Ortega, a guy that's right there in the featherweight championship seat, right on the hot streak. But I think Diego Lopez is even on a quicker and hotter pace and direction to the next person for a flyweight championship opportunity. And he's on a little bit of a heater in comparison to Brian Ortega. So he is 4-0 in his last 4 fights. He's won his last 4 fights. Three of the 4 have been 2 by knockout and 1 by submission. So he's not just beating people and grinding out wins. He's stopping his opponents. And other than Movsar Evloev was his first fight in the UFC, which he lost that by decision. And then his 6th fight out wasn't in the UFC. It was in LUX Fight League, and that was the 28th event. So that was in Mexico as well. But he's 5-1 in his last 6 fights. So and he's had a lot of fights, even though he's younger than Brian Ortega. He's had almost twice as many fights. Well, I guess not twice as many, but 11 more fights, even though he's a younger fighter. And I feel he's a younger fighter and definitely more on the up and coming, and more likely, if he wins this fight, to get a championship bout, a shot at it. But I guess Brian Ortega would too, seeing how he beat the former champion Yari Rodriguez. But in the 31 fights that Diego Lopez had, which he's part of the my I know my mullet right now isn't looking, it's not too bougie looking right now. It's not too cleaned up, but Diego Lopez is part of the mullet family. But in the 25, he's had 25 wins out of the 31 fights, 6 losses in the 25 wins. He's had 10 wins by knockout, so he's definitely has more of a knockout ability and probably better striking than Brian Ortega. But he has 12 wins by submission as well, so he's a true martial artist, which is hard not to say about fighters nowadays. There's hardly ever fighters that are just wrestlers or are just strikers. The ones that end up being successful are the ones that can beat you in any way. You know, can beat you by knockout, can beat you by submission, can go the distance with have good enough cardio to go the distance with fighters. But that's an impressive number there. The 12 submissions is really impressive. And then he has 3 wins by decision and then 6 losses. He's been knocked out 2 times. And then just like Brian Ortega, he can't be submitted. He knows he definitely has a good offensive submission game, but he's got a good defensive one as well. And then he's gone the distance and lost 4 times. So man, this should be a very impressive fighter, a very impressive and exciting fight. Uh, and these are two equal opponents. You know, they're very similar. I would say Diego Lopez, obviously, I would say he has a better striking game and probably has more knockout power and potential than Brian Ortega. And I think that's probably why I'll go. I think I'm going to go with Brian Lopez just because I don't see, obviously I don't see Brian Ortega submitting Brian Lopez, but I don't see Diego Lopez submitting him either. But both of these fighters are so dangerous on the ground, and even though they have shown over their resume that they have great submission defense, I just think I think just both fighters are too dangerous and are fighting for something so important, maybe a featherweight championship eliminator and bout. That's possibly what this could be. I just feel they're too dangerous and have too many ways to beat people that one of them isn't going to catch the other in something. But I just think because Diego Lopez has the more knockout capability, it has that more explosiveness in the knockout game. So in this featherweight bout between Brian Ortega versus Diego Lopez, I'm going with Diego Lopez. I think he's going to get the knockout in this fight. I probably just have to add another one to Diego Lopez's career. Out of the 3 losses, 2 of them have been by knockout. So I just anticipate he's going to get another one here. All right. So now on to the co-main event. We have Alexa Grasso, the champion, versus the challenger, Valentina Shevchenko. And I'm honestly a little surprised by this fight that they're having the trilogy to it already. Even though I understand that my reason for that is because Valentina Shevchenko has lost 1 fight, and then in their second fight, it went to a split draw. So it's like is there no other challengers for the belt? Like, and that was a year ago that they fought and had a draw. That was September 16th, 2023. So Alexa Grasso didn't defend the belt against any. There was no women challengers. They just held up the featherweight division for an entire year so she could just fight Valentina Shevchenko again. I really don't understand that. I do understand it to the point where a lot of people thought Valentina Shevchenko won their last fight, won the draw. You know, I think the draw, when it went split draw, it was like one fighter, one judge picking Valentina Shevchenko, one judge picking Alexa Grasso, and then the other judge had it a draw. I do believe is how it went to a split draw. But still, they've already fought 3 times, and Alexa Grasso has come out still holding their belt the 2 times. So I really don't understand that. And honestly, I really don't want to see this fight for a 3rd time. I mean, it's been great, I guess, but man, just seeing it for a 3rd time. Hopefully, it's exciting. But yeah, so obviously they've been fairly evenly matched. And in the first fight, a lot of people would have said that Valentina Shevchenko was winning that fight before she did like tried to do a spinning back fist or a spinning elbow and then got caught in a face crank submission at almost at the end of the fourth round, the 4:34 mark of the fourth round, and lost their belt like that. But in the two fights that they've had, they both showed that they have good striking game that can compete with each other, but they also have a dangerous ground game. Seemed like a lot of those lot of the rounds from the two fights, it seemed like Valentina Shevchenko was wanted to control it on the ground, but each of the two fights both ended with Alexa Grasso on her back trying to get her in a rear naked choke or finished her with the face crank. So, man, it's hard to pick between those, but I'm just gonna go off of just how dominant Valentina Shevchenko has been, and I don't want to call her losses to Alexa Grasso like kind of fluky, but I mean, I just to not be disrespectful at all, but that's kind of how it feels a little bit. But you got to also look that I've heard Valentina Shevchenko talk about possible retirement, and she is 36 years old. So would I even want someone that's in that in that period of their career to even win the belt again? I don't know. But I think I'm just gonna go with the was the world beater Valentina Shevchenko. So in the flyweight championship bout between Alexa Grasso, the champion, versus Valentina Shevchenko, the challenger, I'm going with Valentina Shevchenko to get her belt back. And I think it's probably they're both very equally matched, you know. So I think this will go to decision this time, but I think there'll be a winner. I think it'll be a little more clear, you know. It won't be one of those situations where maybe it's going to be a draw again, or even though it looks like Valentina Shevchenko edged her out, you got to beat the champ to be the champ. So they'll just go with Alexa Grasso keeping the belt. And honestly, if Valentina Shevchenko wins the belt, I wouldn't be surprised if she retired afterwards, like wins it, or even if she that more, probably even more likely if she loses. I could see Valentina Shevchenko retiring after this, putting her gloves down after this. Wouldn't surprise me at all. So that's that. That's your co-main event. And then now on to the main event. We have a bantamweight bout between Sean O'Malley, the champion, versus Merab Dvalishvili, the challenger. And Merab Dvalishvili, he's basically he's he's your what is it? He's the bantamweight version of Bilal Muhammad. Yeah. Well, let's see. Bilal Muhammad, he's the champion right now in the welterweight division. So so that's so he's the 135 version. Like he's the Bilal Muhammad of the bantamweights and Dracus Duplessis of the bantamweights. These guys uh, are great wrestlers, that's for sure, but not getting a lot of stoppages in their career. I love. I still. I'm a fan of Dashvili. I'm still a fan of Merab Dashvili, even though his fighting style isn't overly exciting. But it's the red coat gate that he had. I guess that was with Israel Adonijah, Sean O'Malley, and Dracus Duplessis all getting in a tiff about something, and Merab Dashvili ended up with that nice red leather jacket. It looked like it looked like Michael Jackson's like leather red jacket from Thriller is what it looked like. So that whole story takes me out. But so it's Sean O'Malley versus Merab Dashvili, who both have like uh, very different styles. You know, Sean O'Malley is like an elite striker with uh, unsuspecting knockout power for a bantamweight, 135 pounder. Has some impressive knockout and just precision striking, and he's been since his no contest with Pedro Munez. That was a accidental eye poke. A little surprising. He hasn't hasn't come up with a rematch between those two after similar to when he lost to Marlon Vera. Took a while for them to finally get the rematch there, but in his last 6 fights, he's 5-0-1 with the no contest being Pedro Munez, and he's just and let's see, three of the 5 wins have been by TKO knockout, and one of those was Aljamain Sterling, which was pretty impressive. And then he got his revenge over Marlon Vera, even though it was in a dominant striking performance. He definitely beat Marlon Vera up, beat his legs and his face up. So it was definitely a one-sided decision win over him. So he's 5-0-1 in his last 6. He's had 20 fights with 18 wins and one loss, and then one no contest. In the 18 wins, 12 of them, almost all of them, have come by knockout. 12 of them by knockout, 1 by submission, and 5 by decision. And then we all know about the one loss coming to Marlon Vera, where he had the issue with his calf and ankle, a foot issue. Basically, had to tap out and take a TKO because he is whatever issues the calf kick got him. And then the one being the Pedro Munez eye poke fight. But as you can see, you know exactly what Sean O'Malley wants to do, and I hadn't really bought into him until after he beat Aljamain Sterling and Marlon Vera. I've kind of bought into what he does and how he has such a great striking game. But he can wrestle and has Brazilian jiu-jitsu as well, but he doesn't really use it in regards to trying to win. He uses it more as a defense to be able to block shot attempts, people shots, and try his takedown defense and being able to get back up even if he does get taken down. And he definitely showed that in his fight against Aljamain Sterling, even though that fight only lasted 51 seconds in the second round. But I mean, everyone knew what Aljamain Sterling, Peter Yan, what those guys wanted to do. They wanted to wrestle and try to take him down and beat him up and show that he's not as well-rounded as a mixed martial artist as those guys. And that was my thinking going into those fights against Peter Yan and Aljamain Sterling. But he showed he doesn't need to use his ground game when he can stay standing and knock everybody out. So that's definitely. And I've come over to the O'Malley side, the rainbow side, I guess, with him with his crazy hair and all that business. But then we have Merab Dvalishvili, who the last pay-per-view that we had Bilal Muhammad, they're very similar fighters. They're all about that sambo and wrestling, and you could say their style is kind of boring. They just kind of grind out wins, and it's not overly often where they're finishing people. So I think Merab Dvalishvili is on a 10-fight winning streak, I think, and every single win has been by decision. So I mean, I really don't know if I'd want that to be my champion, even though it's effective. It wins. There's a belt on Bilal Muhammad's shoulder and waist because of this style. But man, it's just not overly exciting to watch. So, but in his last 6 fights, obviously he's 6-0. He's 10-0 in his last 10 fights, but they're all by decision. In his 21 fights, he has 17 wins, 4 losses. In the 17 wins, he has 3 by knockout, 1 by submission, and 13 by decision. You would think someone that has such a great wrestling and sambo would have more wins by submission. You'd think they'd have more varied repertoire of chokes, at least, face cranks, rear naked choke, guillotines, head and arm triangle. You'd think they'd have more wins just for being so dominant in most of their fights. The majority of them is on the ground, is where they are located. So you'd think people would be getting caught. But I feel like that's probably more because Merab Dvalishvili, like, yeah, he's dominant on the ground, but it's because he kind of like just holds people there, holds people down. And see, do we go over the four losses? In his four losses, he's never been knocked out, never been submitted, and yeah, has been submitted once, and then three by decision. So I mean, if Merab Dvalishvili is going to win this, it's most likely going to go to decision. And man, wanting to pick Sean O'Malley here, even though uh, Merab Dvalishvili has never been knocked out. I feel that Merab Dvalishvili's probably never fought a striker as accurate and as devastating as Sean O'Malley at the 135 position. So even though he's never been knocked out, I feel that's Sean O'Malley's definitely that's his path to victory. His path to victory is definitely a knockout in the standing striking game, kickboxing, boxing, and Merab Dvalishvili's path to victory is probably just grinding out a 5-round decision win where for the most of a part of it, he's probably just holding Sean O'Malley down for the majority of each round, and he's just throwing pitter patter punches, and maybe changing position on the ground every so often so it doesn't get stood up. But I honestly don't want to see that. I think I'd rather see Merab Dvalishvili get knocked out. So in the main event, the bantamweight championship bout between Sean O'Malley versus Merab Dvalishvili, I got Sean O'Malley winning this by knockout. And let's say, trying to think how how long I think this fight would go. Maybe towards the end of the second or the big start early portion of the third round. I see Sean O'Malley knocking Merab Dvalishvili out. So I'm here for it. I hope all of you are here for it. Get to check out the Sphere, get to see what it looks like on the inside, and get to celebrate Mexican Independence Day. So I'm here for it. I honestly am not overly excited for this card, probably because it's a women's championship bout and then a smaller weight class bout or your two championships, and then uh, what four of the 10 fighters on the card are fighters that have never even fought on a pay-per-view, a main event card, pay-per-view card. It's all been Dana White series events and NFL UFC fight nights. So besides the top three fights, I'm not overly excited for this card, but like a lot of cards, you down them and you rag on them. They usually end up being some of the best cards of the year. So that's what I'm hoping for. But let's just go over my picks here real quick, see if we can remember anything. Uh, so Odie Osborne versus Ronaldo Rodriguez. Odie Osborne's on a little bit of a hot streak here lately of losing fights to rear naked choke. So in the flyweight bout between Ronaldo Rodriguez versus Odie Osborne, I got Ronaldo Rodriguez adding a third loss to Odie Osborne's record by way of rear naked choke. That's his poison, I believe. And then second fight, the lightweight bout between Daniel Zellhuber versus Esteban Ribovics. I got both of these fighters are very similar and have very similar records. Showed that they're both tough and can get knockouts, can get submissions, but never get knocked out or submitted. And both of them have only lost once in their career, out of each having like close to 15 fights each. I'm just gonna go with Daniel Zellerberg to just win this by decision, but this should be a very close and competitive fight. It wouldn't surprise me at all to see Esteban win this by way of decision himself. And then featherweight bout between the third bout is a featherweight bout between Brian Ortega versus Diego Lopez. And Diego Lopez, he's kind of on a heater, kind of on a hot streak here, and kind of on a clear path to a featherweight championship bout. And the only person standing in his way is Brian Ortega. And even though Brian Ortega, he's tough too, and doesn't get knocked out very often, but I do believe, yeah, if he does lose, it is by way of knockout. Two of his three losses have come by way of knockout. So I'd say that's probably Diego Lopez's best path to victory over Brian Ortega. So in the flyweight bout between Brian Ortega versus Diego Lopez, I got Diego Lopez winning by knockout. And then on to the fourth fight of the night, UFC 306, O'Malley versus Dvalishvili, is the co-main event, women's flyweight bout between Alexa Grasso, the champion, versus the challenger, Valentina Shevchenko. And I think this is just going to be more of the same from the first two fights they've had, where it's just kind of back and forth. One looks better striking at moments of the fights, the other looks better in the striking game at moments of the fights. Then one chooses to try to use their ground game, and then the other one chooses and gets a position where they're in control of the ground game. They're just very evenly matched fighters, and if it continues to go the way like towards the last fight went, and how the first fight between them was going, I would see Valentina Shevchenko being able to edge out a decision victory, because even with how the fights, but both first two fights went, Alexa Grasso won the first, and the second fight went to split draw. I mean, majority of people would say that Valentina Shevchenko won the second fight and was winning the first fight. So in the women's flyweight championship bout between Alexa Grasso, the champion, versus the challenger Valentina Shevchenko, I'm going with Valentina Shevchenko to finally get the victory over Alexa Grasso. And no matter how the fight goes, whether she wins or loses, I could definitely see Valentina Shevchenko laying down the glove, and I definitely think she will if she loses to Alexa Grasso again, because that'll kind of be like she can't get over the hump, and she'll have to go to the back of the line if she loses for a third time, and like loses for a second time and has the split draw on her loss. There would be no reason to have another fourth fight between them. She'd have to go to the back of the line and win a couple fights, and she's already 36 years old. By the time all that happens, she'd probably be 40 years old, and Alexa Grasso may not even be the champion still. So on to the main event. We have a bantamweight championship bout between the champion Sean O'Malley versus Merab Dvalishvili. So we've already gone over how there's two different styles. I was talking about like the first two fights on the card, how the fighters they're a little bit younger fighters, I guess. So they grow up as mixed martial artists. Like they're not growing up to where they're wanting to be a boxer or they're wanting to be a wrestler. Like they're already doing all at the same time. They're training all of them at the same time. They're training ground game, they're training striking. Well, that's a little different between these two fighters in the main event, because Sean O'Malley, he wants to keep it standing and striking. Doesn't really want to have to deal with blocking takedown shot attempts and having to get back up, even though he can do that. He would rather keep it standing. And then Merab Dvalishvili, on the other hand, is a great wrestler, a great sambo, and he just wants to take you down and hold you there and just grind out a win. So they're completely different in that regard. And I wouldn't say they're completely well-rounded mixed martial artists where they're just equally good at both. Obviously Sean O'Malley's a better striker and Merab Dvalishvili is better on the ground. But I just don't want to see Merab Dvalishvili. We already got Bilal Muhammad as the welterweight champion. I don't think we need any more wrestlers or grinded out type of fighters that don't get knockout or submission stoppages. So even though Merab Dvalishvili's never been knocked out, I'm going with Sean O'Malley to retain his bantamweight championship versus Merab Dvalishvili, and I think he's going to knock Merab Dvalishvili out. I think that'll come towards the end of the second, Sean O'Malley may get Merab Dvalishvili on his heels toward the ends of the second, and then be able to finish him in the third way of knockout. But anyways, that's my picks. I'm excited about this card, just to see what this whole Spear setup is like what it looks like, how the fans are set up in the K and set up in the arena, how close they are to the octagon, how big the octagon is. That's something I'm kind of wondering. Is the octagon going to be bigger or smaller because it's in the sphere? But more to check that out. But the card itself, to me, feels a little underwhelming. But it'll probably overachieve what I'm expecting, because that's usually how it goes. These balling crazy Hollywood, just nonstop one versus two or one versus champion, like every single fight. Those are usually end up being the cards that end up being disappointing. So I just gotta stay positive, and I do want to see Sean O'Malley. I would say he's like right there with kind of your superstar fighters right now. And Valentina Shevchenko was when she was a champion, but not anymore. But I'm ready for it, and I hope everyone else enjoys it as well. But anyways, I think that's all I have for you. So can I get a check, please?